Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining this breakout session. Today, we'll be talking about extending the power of G Suite by adding custom no-code applications built with AppSheet. My name is Santiago Uribe, and I'm a product manager with the AppSheet team here in Google Cloud. I'm joined by Richard Glass from KLB Construction. Hi, Richard. Maybe you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, Santiago. Yeah, my name's Richard Glass. I'm the Director of Information Technology here at KLB Construction. We are a heavy highway construction company with lots of experience here with rapid transit projects and interstate highway, earth moving, underground utilities.
Thank you, Richard. Before we get started, I wanted to make a quick introduction about AppSheet. Many of you who are joining this presentation may not know about AppSheet just yet, and we just want to make a quick introduction about it. So AppSheet is a no-code application platform that lets people create applications on top of their own data, and it helps teams manage data more efficiently. It helps adding automation and also keeping everybody in the loop. AppSheet joined the Google Cloud family in January 2020, and we're very excited to see what the future holds. So Richard, you've been using AppSheet for quite a while now, and also you're a G Suite customer for several years. So we think that this is a good opportunity to maybe start sharing a little bit more about how you've been using AppSheet and Google's G Suite in the past.
Sure. We basically started with AppSheet as a way to replace paper processes and make them into digital workflows. We've already have 18 apps deployed into the field, and that helps us keep our office and our field folks in communication with each other. A lot of the apps talk directly to Google Drive via the Google Sheets and Google Docs. And we are a customer that also uses Google backend for our email.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So to give you more context about your experience, we want to cover three strategies in this presentation. We wanna bring down what you've done with AppSheet and G Suite and kind of share those strategies to the crowd here. We will be talking about three core topics. We'll talk about digitizing processes. We're going to talk about automation, and we're going to talk about getting tools and resources in front of those users. So the way we want to do this presentation is by having a quick conversation with Richard around those topics. So Richard, you'll be sharing a little bit more about your journey, and we will also have some time to show you a couple of demos about how AppSheet works on top of G Suite. So to start, let's set the stage. If you think about it, the core challenge with organizations that are seeking to digitize more processes is that if they choose to create custom applications, if you do it in a traditional manner, the development methods take too much time and resources. That means that most of the applications that need to be built never get built, right? Conversely, if you choose packaged software, they may need to change the process to fit the software because the packaged software is rigid. So that is the challenge on what we call the last mile of digitization. If you have those two choices, it's difficult to make a choice. So you want to find some middle ground where you can have customization that really adapts to the processes that you run. So that situation, that challenge really generates a situation where many processes still remain offline and core applications are not interacting with other areas of the business. This visualization tries to exemplify that, right? You see core processes that are running with pieces of software like your CRM, your ERP, and other tools. But you also see other processes floating around them that try to interface with the data. Think about photo capture, maybe email, lots of spreadsheets, and lots of pen and paper processes. So Richard, what's your take on this type of process and this kind of situation in an organization?
Well, KLB has looked at a bunch of off-the-shelf solutions, and none of them really fit our company or our workflow. Like most companies, we have an accounting system, ERP, and we have people out in the field that are filling out pen and paper applications, and a lot of office people do spreadsheets. AppSheet is the first platform that we've used where we're able to kind of merge all those environments together. And that plus the mobile applications allowing us to capture pictures has been a real benefit to KLB.
Got it. So you pretty much had processes that were already sitting in this kind of model where you had pen and paper in the field, spreadsheet sitting in central office, but all the information was either too distributed, wasn't centralized, and maybe those applications were living in silos on their own.
Right. It was really hard to kind of get everybody on the same platform. It's just like kind of a disjointed process. We even had people that at the end of their shifts would be stopping by the office, dropping off paperwork. Um, now we can like have everyone talking at the same time using the same data source, and then it allows us to work more efficiently.
Got it. So maybe let's talk about then the strategies that you use to approach this process of digitization and how you start to digitize multiple processes at KLB. Um, for this presentation, we want to propose 3 strategies to bring value faster and really enable employees to work faster, smarter, and more collaboratively than ever before. And we see them as simple but actually powerful strategies. It really starts with identifying what the key processes that you're going to digitize and how to turn them into applications. So Richard, you're going to share a couple of examples with us in a few minutes. After you do that, then you think about expanding the scope of those applications by adding automation, really expanding the scope and complexity of those applications. And finally, we're going to be talking about making sure that the right people have access to those applications and to those resources. The key ingredient here, though, is to make sure that more people have the ability to create apps, to digitize those processes. Instead of centralizing application creation in an extreme way, you actually want to make more people enabled to be able to create and digitize those processes. Let's talk a little bit more about key processes that need to be digitized. So in our previous conversations, Richard, you shared an interesting approach to AppSheet at KLB and how you decide which processes to be digitized or not. So maybe you want to share a little bit more about your approach in terms of your choices for digitizing applications.
Sure. One of the things we think about is like, is this data going to touch more than one person? If it's just one person kind of like taking notes, and there's no need to kind of share beyond that one person, that data is sort of encapsulated. We don't have to worry about it. But as soon as the data needs to get put out, in other people's hands, then that's information that we want to look at in terms of AppSheet and these digital processes. In the field, foremen are in charge of the project, and they're keeping track of production. That information is used for pay estimates and for accounting purposes. So that's information that's ripe for sharing. The existing software that's available is pretty clunky, and AppSheet's kind of a nice platform that allows us to live in the computer environment, live in the mobile environment, and leverage our Google Cloud G Suite platform.
All right, so maybe let's create a quick application to show the attendees how AppSheet apps work with G Suite. So Richard, tell us a little bit more about one of the processes that you converted into AppSheet applications.
Sure, thanks, Santiago. So KLB has documentation that we create for the production on site. It's done by the foreman. It's done daily. It's the story of what happened on site that day, and it can document people, equipment, the actual production, the import and exported material, or any of the challenges that may have been faced on site, such as weather or safety concerns.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the data that is incorporated in this process.
Sure. So our foreman actually had paper that they were tracking the daily production, and so it was a form that would produce whatever they wrote in triplicate, and they'd hand some off to the owner of the project and put one into the job trailer for reference. Mm-hmm. The data was locked up in their hands, but we took that form and columns like date, the job, who the foreman is, those all translated right into the Google spreadsheet. You can kind of see what Santiago has in front of you guys. Mm-hmm. So employee information, pictures, the description of what happened that day, any type of production.
Got it. So for the purpose of this demo, we kind of created a mock data set that contains those key records, right? The employees, the information about the jobs, the actual daily report, right? And photos. And you were telling me earlier that photos is actually very important in the new application that you have created for the daily reports. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. So the smartphones that folks are using in the field, the cameras kept getting better, and the pictures themselves could show the actual production, the challenges on site, and in a lot of detail, more so than even words. So we switched from having like a fixed amount of photos to just having a photo table dedicated to the app and allowing users to put as many photos as they wanted for a daily.
That sounds great. So I'm thinking that we should probably just create a quick application that does the capture of the daily report and also shows a gallery of pictures of the photos. All right. One thing that I wanted to point here, Richard, is that this spreadsheet has a reference to the image, right, that is sitting in the Google Drive. So these are the actual pictures, but in the spreadsheet, they're just references to that image. And what we're going to do with AppSheet is that we're going to connect this spreadsheet with the AppSheet application. So AppSheet can read this information and actually render it as a mobile app. All right. So let me just get started by going into appsheet.com. Right. I'm going to go to my apps section and create a new app. I'm going to call it Daily Reports. And let's call it Planning and Project Management. AppSheet will let me select from multiple data sources. I'm going to use my Google information. I'm going to pull the daily spreadsheet. So this is the G Suite that we're just showing in this other tab. And what AppSheet is doing right now is that it's reading the information in that Google Sheet and it's creating a first version of the application. It's going to pick the first tab in the sheet, which in this case is the Employees tab, and it's going to render it as an application, or it's going to do its best guess at how an application should look like for the information that has in it. And what you see on the right is a live emulation of the app. What you see on the left is the environment where you get to modify that application. You will notice that AppSheet is a no-code platform, so you don't have to write any code to create your app. Here's a quick thing that you want to see when you are working with AppSheet. If you go back to your Google Sheet, you'll realize that the Google Sheet itself now is acting as the database for that app. So for the employees table that I just brought in, it's being presented as a nice mobile view, but I can actually go into that view and edit the data. So let's add a middle name to this fake employee of the company. And let's make it Anna, right? And then save in this form. And you'll see that once I start writing that information, if I go back to the spreadsheet, it's immediately written back into the Google Sheet. So this is the tab with the employees. And what I want to do now then is just add the other tabs that are available in the Google Sheet. AppSheet immediately identified that there are other tabs and is suggesting to add them as tables into my app. So I'm going to add those automatically. I'm going to add jobs, the daily, and photos. AppSheet will make its best guess at figuring out how this application should look like. It will actually create tabs and views for the application with the information you're just adding. Now for this application, Richard, I think we should summarize this and create just a daily collection and just a photo gallery. So let's do that change very quickly. I'm gonna go into the UX section of AppSheet. You'll see that most of the changes that you make on AppSheet are really just about defining how the data behaves. There's a bunch of views here that I just want to remove because I don't want to create my application with those views just yet. So I'm going to remove the map. I'm going to remove the employees view, the calendar, and just leave that daily view, but I'm going to make it a table view, all right? And AppSheet automatically updates that application with that new pattern. In this case, you can add a new daily report by clicking on the plus sign. But I also want to create a quick view with the gallery. That gallery view is created. I'm going to make it an actual gallery view. And I want it to look, instead of the pictures of the employees, I want it to look at the photos, right? And those are the photos that are stored in my Google Drive, displayed inside of a mobile application. And that just happens in seconds. So I'm going to save and keep this version of my application. Now let's move and talk about automation and automating tasks. So we usually see organizations discovering more processes that can be enabled after they start creating applications. The apps begin with simple patterns and then grow in scope and complexity. Richard, as you mentioned in the demo, you started with this core daily report application, and you could easily see where in different aspects of the app that application could evolve. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how those applications have evolved in terms of automation.
Sure. We were able to kind of like start with basically telling the story on site with words in the daily app, and that grew to be more picture intensive. I mean, cameras have gotten a lot better in mobile devices, and we wanted to allow our foremen to be able to take more and more pictures. So those pictures themselves have become like feeds for managers to look at progress on site. And then also there's notifications. We do email and text messages. So when there's a new daily or there's a new delivery on site, we can notify the relevant personnel right away instead of like phone calls or notes to people. It just happens automatically in the background. And then with the dashboards, you can combine several apps and the functionality all into one easy to look at place. So we've leveraged a lot of the functionality of AppSheet, and over time, it's just grown.
Got it. So in a way, something that you just start with this core functionality, this core pattern, right? And you just start adding more functionality to it, as you were mentioning. So things like adding maybe GPS capture location information, notifications, emails. Those are things that you keep adding on top of the core AppSheet application that you built. And that's something that you get to do on AppSheet also in a no-code way. So we want to show you a little bit more about how you can add extra functionality to an application and help accelerate the process. So let's just quickly move into our demo. And to set the stage in this demo, I want to kind of highlight a few things that are usually automated when you start with AppSheet with those simple patterns and then take it to more advanced and robust applications. So some of the patterns that we've seen is that people try to simplify data capture, right? So as you were mentioning, Richard, you add image capture or barcode scanning functionality into the application. Sometimes people create applications that combine data capture and data display. So people are informed at the same time as they're submitting information through the application. And finally, adding workflow rules and time triggers to the application. So there's other actions that happen automatically beyond just the pure use of the application. So Richard, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the automation that we're planning to add into this daily report application that we discussed.
So this is basically a simple version of our daily report.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to send out a notice when there's an update.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's completed a daily and they need to make a change, we're going to update the user saying, hey, here's the new information that's changed since the last time you looked at this report.
Perfect. So let's just show how to add that automation into the AppSheet application we already started. Okay, so we're back into the AppSheet application for daily reports. We did a couple of tweaks behind the scenes. We added a couple of nice icons to the views. And we also hid some information that is not necessarily to show inside of the application itself. What we want to do now is create simple automation inside of this application. And we want to do it by just sending an email whenever a daily report is changed. And you can achieve that by going to the Behavior tab and creating a workflow rule. Creating workflow rules in AppSheet is both very simple but also very powerful. So I'm going to create a simple change workflow rule. I'm going to trigger this workflow rule when there is a particular change in my daily tables, right? That's the table that contains the information or the reports from the people in the field. And I want to make sure that it only happens when people update the information. I have the possibility of creating an additional condition to the data, but I'm actually going to skip that and just create an email notification when any change happens. And what I'm going to do then is define that actual action. And in this case, I'm going to say send that email to AppSheet. And I want to do it with default content, but you can actually use Google Docs as templates for the emails that you want to send. So I'm going to use the default content here and I'm going to save my application. So right now my application has an automation functionality enabled. Whenever I go to daily, I can pick any of these daily reports. And if I go and make a change, and in this case, I'm going to add a change by going to the end of this edit record and having the signature field changed. So I'm going to create this signature field and I'm going to hit save. When that happens, that's an actual update that happens to the data. AppSheet is going to save the data back into the spreadsheet as we saw before, but it should also send an email to my inbox. And now we have an email in our inbox that contains the summary information of that record and the signature itself. Now let's talk a little bit more about getting applications and tools in front of the key users of those applications. So Richard, you mentioned earlier that you have over 18 applications in production right now. Tell us a little bit more about how you get those applications deployed to your users.
So our general development strategy is to work hand in hand with the people that are going to use the app. So in the field, it's typically the foreman. And so we start with a small group, and we'll create an initial kind of stab at the app and then get feedback and add functionality and feature requests. It's a collaborative approach, and with AppSheet, the changes don't take very long to implement. We're able to develop kind of on the fly and give the functionality that the folks in the field want, that allow us to replace the pen and paper processes that had existed before.
Yeah, and that's something that we saw on the demo, right? We were making updates of the application live, and when we were making those updates, they were just reflected directly in the application. So it's very interesting to see where you have this type of architecture. You have the back end of the data is living in G Suites right now. AppSheet helps you configure the application, define the application, and then they get immediately deployed to the users on their mobile devices. That distribution usually happens by sending them an install link to the application so they can install it on their mobile devices, or they can also load the application from a browser window. Maybe, Richard, you can tell us a little bit more about the process of deciding, because I really like that approach from your perspective. When do you decide that the application is actually passing a specific bar to keep working on that particular application? And it had to do with pen and paper, and I really like that approach from the KLB side.
So we try to make the apps easier than pen and paper. So anything that we can do to kind of like pre-fill in forms for a user, whether it's a date or previous responses, we leverage that as a way to kind of get the users to adopt the applications. And sometimes, it takes a little bit of time to get traction, but usually there's a few foremen that will be early adopters. And once they get excited about it, they can pass on that enthusiasm and get other users involved as well.
That sounds great. Okay, so we wanted to just quickly summarize what we talked about in this presentation and what we demo. We gave you 3 strategies to work on digitizing processes using G Suite and AppSheet. The recommendations that we make to everybody in this session is to really start simple and figure out what is that pain point that the user has, and find the simplest process that you really want to solve for. So don't go big immediately. Actually, go and solve for very specific pain points. You should be able to iterate really fast after you start applications with AppSheet and G Suite then. So maybe what I wanted to do at this point, after sharing what those strategies are, right? Digitizing more processes, automating tasks, and then making those applications available and making process discovery available for your users is, Richard, I actually wanted to thank you a lot for being a partner through this process, through this presentation, and through the journey that you have with AppSheet. So I actually have just one quick last question, and tell me a little bit more about who are the people that have been creating applications on AppSheet at KLB.
Sure. Generally, I was the first person that created the AppSheet apps. But over time, we've involved interns who have been able to help us on database type activities, as well as the front end development through AppSheet. On occasion, we actually do talk to the AppSheet folks too. They're very helpful, and even Santiago, you've given us some great ideas too on how to use some new features of AppSheet. The process with AppSheet is always changing. It's a great platform because if you think of it and if you give the input back to AppSheet, they will try to make it happen. So we have grown with AppSheet. AppSheet has grown with us. The functionality is really impressive.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you, Richard. Okay, so I think it's time to go. I want to thank you all for joining this session and for watching the video as well. We suggest that you visit appsheet.com to learn more about AppSheet and how to leverage your user investments to digitize more processes in your organization. Once again, Richard, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Santiago. Appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining. Bye-bye.